This is The Future Of, where experts share their vision of the future and how their work is helping shape it for the better. I'm David Carston.
And I'm Celeste Furry. According to the UN, 68% of the world's population will live in urban areas by 2050. To keep up with this rapid population growth and the resulting demands on infrastructure, services, and the environment, we have to be smarter about urban planning and development. Around the world, cities are leveraging technology and data to improve their livability, sustainability, and productivity. So what does this look like in reality? And does more technology inevitably mean more surveillance?
Well, with us today to explore smart cities is Dr Courtney Babb, a senior lecturer in urban and regional planning at Curtin University. We explore what makes a city smart and look at local examples of smart cities in practice. If you'd like to find out more about this research, you can visit the links provided in the show notes.
Courtney, what is a smart city and why do we need cities to be smart?
I suppose there's a simple answer to that, but it is a lot more complicated. But we'll start with a simple answer. And smart cities are about information and more accurately, I suppose, about data. So it's about utilising data that comes from the city. It's about how people use the city. It's about the different systems within the city. And it's about capturing that data and using it for particular purposes, making a better, more livable city, helping our transport systems operate more efficiently, all of these kinds of things. IBM came up with a kind of definition of or a description of smart cities, which I think is quite useful for a kind of basic understanding. And they talked about smart cities as being instrumented, integrated and intelligent. So instrumented means that there's lots of sensors out in the built environment or ways that we capture data. Integrated means that data's kind of collected in a repository or somewhere, a data set, and it's basically integrated with lots of different types of data. And then intelligent means that we apply some analytic skill techniques to it or to make use of that, and then we can sort of plan and use that data to better manage cities and also better plan them for future growth.
Courtney, IBM's been around for a while. It's a name I haven't heard in some time. Yeah. It would suggest that smart cities or the concept of smart cities has been around for a little while now. Are there examples of countries and cities that are doing this well?
Yeah, so it's a term that's been around for a while, but it is actually an idea that extends a lot older than the term smart cities itself. Then I might talk about that a little bit later, but it's there was a lot of activity about smart cities from the 1990s onwards. Smart cities were seen as a way to enhance kind of green growth in a lot of cities. Good example, and a place I took a bunch of students in 2023 and 2024 was to South Korea. I think Singapore sort of kicked off globally smart cities, South Korea a little bit later, but really great, I suppose, example of a very mature and well-funded smart cities urban program. And we visited a city called Songdo, and Songdo it's within the Seoul metropolitan area. It was a purpose-built city, so basically it was sometimes described as a tabula rasa or a blank slate, and it's not technically correct because they destroyed a lot of tidal flats and very sensitive wetlands to build this city, but it was constructed early 2000s, and it's a purpose-built smart city. So all the infrastructure is integrated within the city. It has water recycling, a range of sensors, cameras everywhere in the city, and this is collected within a data center, a command center, basically. And we took our students there. We could see 50 screens from various cameras around and people sitting there monitoring this. So the data's collected in real time. And in this case, the operations center responded to the images that were coming in from data, from traffic, if there's a flood or something like this, and then they can respond. and direct services to where there might be an emergency, range of things. So South Korea is a really good example of a very mature smart city.
Courtney, I've just remembered, and no word of a lie, probably between 2008 and 2010, I was actually there. I was in Songdo during a lot of the construction or the back end of the construction of that that precinct, and it was astounding. It really was a ground up a ground up view and a ground up approach to creating exactly what you've explained to us. But yeah, even from the moment you come through that airport, which I'm sure even now just looks, it's at Incheon, isn't it?
Incheon, yes.
Still is probably the most futuristic and stunning airport you'll ever see.
Yep.
It's South Koreans have had such a forward-thinking approach to this, and what have been the benefits in Songdo now that they've got all of this research, this real-time data collection under their belts?
It has a bit of a mixed kind of reception in terms of whether it's a good city. People note when they first go there that there's not a lot of people around, very wide streets, and so great infrastructure, great. It's 40% of Songdo is open space and parks, so very very generous outdoor living. But yeah, that sort of has a reputation of not being particularly. It's a bit of a ghost town. I think that's changing, and we as part of the study tour, when the students were up there, we went and talked to residents and talked to people about what it was like to live there, and it is changing. The people who live there appreciate it, and like the particular services available, but it's also tends to be for more wealthier residents, who can afford to live there. Songdo it has a good reputation for being what we call a kind of utopian smart city. So it's the idea of the city as a whole being infused with technology, and technology helps helps for the city to function. So. And there are examples, Songdo as an example, and there are other examples in the Middle East and Africa. There's a lot of purpose-built smart cities or ideas. A lot of this is based on the idea as well. So what I've focused on in my research, and this is follows the work of a number of scholars in this area, is what we call the actually existing smart city. So this is an idea that basically we should move away from thinking about smart cities as this total sort of utopian vision and look more at the subtle ways that I suppose digital technologies are being integrated into cities. Urban development is a lot more messy than this kind of process in Songdo, which was was very well funded. It was on reclaimed land, so it didn't have that sort of the messiness of cities. So what the scholarship on actually existing smart cities, it looks at the projects and looks at the smaller kind of scale instances where smart technology or digital technology has been integrated, and takes that as a starting point. And what that does, it's useful because it sort of points to the different varieties of smart cities. So getting away from this idea of this big utopian smart city, we can start to think about cities as being surveilled spaces through cameras, and increasingly more automation through technology. So automated cities, artificial intelligence, and we can kind of look at the different aspects and how they are emerging in smaller projects, local governments, and that's important, particularly for Australia, where that's the main type of smart city investment that is being made, in smart city projects that are being rolled out.
It sounds like smart cities and the concept of has been around for a while. Traditionally, how has urban development usually been done?
It's a lot more fragmented, and the projects are smaller, piecemeal. They get built at different stages, and they might be part of an overall vision, but the way that urban development sort of proceeds is a lot more sort of incrementally, and it's factored by a lot more stakeholders having a say in that decision making, developers, community members, as well as planners, engineers, architects as well, who are more directly involved in producing the built environment. So we have to kind of, as planners, we we try to accommodate and listen to all those voices within the urban development process, and make that part of the way that we do develop, rather than a sort of top-down vision imposed upon people. So again, that kind of creates. I like the word messiness. It's something I think we need to embrace as planners, and often plans don't go according to how we do sort of see them originally, and plans take time as well, and cities take time to evolve as well. So we need to respond to that.
The Wharf Street Basin in Cannington, Perth is WA's first ever smart park. Can you tell us a little bit more about this project and your involvement? And what exactly is a smart park?
Sure. So this project, it was funded through the Smart Cities and Suburbs scheme, through the Smart Cities plan, the federal government's plan. And so the Wharf Street Basin was previously, before it became a smart park, it was a fenced-off stormwater basin in the city of Canning. So the Canning City Centre is undergoing a transformation as part of the activity centre, and turning into an urban regeneration, an activity site near the train station there, high density. In this area, because it's a flat area, it's near the river, stormwater and stormwater drainage is a big issue. So they have a number of stormwater drains in the area. You might know these places, they're usually fenced off. There'll be a drain on a suburban block. Sometimes there'll be a linear drain. So these are to protect households from flooding and surrounding areas from flooding. So the Wharf Street Basin was a fenced-off drain. No one used it in the centre of Canning. And through the Smart Cities and Suburbs scheme, the City of Canning with the Water Corporation and a number of other stakeholders, including Curtin and us as researchers, we were the park received money to be transformed into what was called a smart park. I'm not sure if many people knew what a smart park at the time was, or what it could be. But it was really about using technology to kind of leverage the things that the functions of an urban park in this context. And this is, people want to use it. If they live in the apartments, it needs to have space for walking, integration with the sort of the natural environment there. It was a place because it was a stormwater drain. There was education there about the role of stormwater drains in cities. So there was an education component, and really it became a kind of multifunctional park. It wasn't just a park to go. It was there to also sort of secure the long-term viability of the area by having high quality public space. Technology formed a really important part of that, and so a lot of the sensors used, there were smart bins that told you when they needed emptying, public Wi-Fi. There were environmental sensors about the water quality, and this was fed to an open data platform, and that was to be used by researchers to sort of see how in real time how water quality was being affected in the area, and how it was sort of functioning ecologically. And CCTV cameras, and also a range of other sort of informative technology as well. There were augmented reality stations in which people had apps. They could go and learn about the animals that were in the park, and it would sort of show you through the app on your phone as you put your camera through this viewfinder. It would show you the different animals and things, and the life and the ecology of the park. So technology was there to serve a number of functions, safety, livability, but also sort of environmental knowledge research, and also community kind of understanding of the role of stormwater drainage infrastructure.
And the function of the stormwater basin, was that affected at all, or is it fully still operating?
It's still fully operating as a.
Wow.
Yeah, that was one of the challenges, is that the basin had to function as a stormwater. There was that required some I suppose, sort of clever design, and some sometimes difficult conversations. But ultimately, I think it was interesting to sort of see the trade-offs here between the different functions to make this space work. So we followed it in its implementation. We also followed it after it was built and watched it and observed the park over a year and how people used it. So it's a very successful park. But I think one of the interesting things about this is that the technology wasn't kind of the main factor that made it a success. There's definitely some great elements to the technology that did work, but some of them, because it was a very tight time frame, it had to be delivered in a very short amount of time. We didn't really have the organisational knowledge for a lot of the tech side of it. So a lot of it was learning, and that was part of the Smart Cities plan, was to build that capacity to that.
It seems like these smart cities and parks do employ a lot of technology, such as cameras. Is there a risk of creating these surveillance areas?
Cameras are a big part of smart cities. When we went to Seoul and South Korea, that was one of the things we really noticed, is that there were cameras everywhere. But also it was a lot of disclosure about where there were cameras and what they were being used for. Surveillance also happens in different ways. Obviously through our phones. We're all sort of geolocated now, so we can we can be surveilled about where we are as well. But also then you link that up with, think of sometimes surveillance as being conducted by the government, but corporations surveil us through technologies and smart technologies as well. So there's a real desire to sort of link data sets as well through surveillance, and through that data becomes very powerful. It can tell us more about the behaviour of users, their attitudes, their preferences, and things like this. But there's also obviously there's privacy and ethical issues around that. In South Korea, I mean, surveillance can have positive benefits. South Korea, we asked many people about the cameras and what they thought. Many of them had not even considered them. It was something in the background. South Korea has reasonable sort of data protection laws at the national level, so these things are important as well. But we need to think about technologies called dual-use technologies, is that they can have benefits, but there can also be harmful aspects to that technology. So one of the problems is not so much the technology itself, but when we introduce a system of technology, say a surveillance system in a local government, it may be implemented in an ethical way or something like this, but the kind of the architecture and the infrastructure is there. So it can be a very simple change later on, and that technology might be used for a different purpose.
Courtney, you co-authored a report that was published last year by the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute. It was essentially about how data can be better used to protect homes from disasters such as floods, bushfires, and cyclones. Can you tell us more about this research and its practical impact?
Sure. This research, it was really much about how planners and also others involved in delivering planning and delivering of housing, how they use data. Data is really important in this space due to the impacts of climate change, which are creating a lot more uncertainty about the impacts of and also the magnitude and the occurrence of fires, floods, and cyclones. So we were interested to see, kind of get a sense of the state of the art in how data was being used in this space. So what we did find is that the data landscape in Australia is very poor. It's, even though there can be good quality data out there, it's pretty fragmented. So in urban development and particularly urban development for new housing, we need to think usually sort of local governments and state governments key actors, but but with hazards, hazards often don't respect administrative boundaries, and we find that sort of data can be good in one location or one organisation administration, not so good in others. So very sort of patchwork, the data. Planners didn't often know how to assess whether data was good quality. They could see a data set, but they didn't know the sort of assumptions that were built into that. And also organisations were very siloed as well. They weren't interested in sharing data, and in order to understand and really leverage this data, we really need to think outside the local administrative boundaries and more thinking sort of more systemically about this. So we saw the situation in Australia. It was not great. So there's been a number of I suppose solutions provided how to improve this. One of them is what we call digital twins, and there's kind of talking to planners. There's great hope in this technology to help us understand climate risk. To not only understand, because like I said, there's a lot of uncertainty, but to create some scenarios to sort of explore what could happen and to incorporate this kind of thinking into our planning, rather than looking at historical records, which is usually how data about risk and hazards has been done. So digital twins create a kind of digital version of it might be a building, a precinct. We're interested in maybe a sort of a river catchment or something like this to understand sort of flooding. And it creates data in real time and responsive, so that we can kind of start to model systems rather than sort of these look at these issues in isolation, to understand how the systems might operate. In this way, we can understand some of the impacts and start to think about in the context of this uncertainty.
If listeners are interested in finding out more about the whole concept of digital twins, we actually had a great conversation here on this podcast with Zoida Sama. That was really informative. So we'll provide a link in the show notes to that one as well. Now, I have a question about the report and I guess its end use. Is this very much also a response to I guess spiraling insurance costs for homeowners?
It is. Insurance is one of the factors driving the need for research, and it's driven by findings that large areas will be uninsurable in the future due to the risks of hazards. One of the things we did find in the research is that I suppose some of the best quality data is held by insurance agencies. But also, and this sort of creates a need for the imperative for sharing and how we can. But often that data is locked away, private, confidential. So there's concerted efforts in the insurance industry and also government for ways to better share this data, so that we can be acting on the best quality data that is available.
Is our data safe?
That's a really good question, and I think it's one that probably I think we can ask when we are involved in this project. So even as citizens, if there is a project that concerns and things like this, but they're the questions we need to ask. Is it being secure? Is it being stored safely? Security with safeguards, protocols in place that respect our privacy, that we're fully made aware of the way that data will be used. And these are best practice about, I suppose, ethical use in data, and not always evident in, I suppose, the messy world of urban development.
If there was one thing about Perth that you would change as an urban planner and designer to make it smarter, what would it be?
Okay, I'm a little. Sometimes I'm a little cursed with. We talk about in urban planning about sometimes the complexity, and that there's no wicked problems. There's no sort of simple solution, and doing one thing will create a whole heap. But I'll have a go. I do. One of my areas of research is urban mobility. I think I mentioned earlier. So I'm interested in particularly around sustainable transport. trying to get people out of cars, walking, cycling, scootering, whatever, more. And there's a number of reasons why we need to do this, decarbonisation, whole range of issues, but particularly about livable. These are better places to live, I think, if we have cities in which we don't need to rely on the car, and the car has a less impact on our public spaces. So, and the built environment, given, although we're talking about digital urbanism and things, it's a very analog thing. So it's very, it's material, and a lot of the solutions, the best solutions, are not necessarily technological solutions. So I think in terms of what I would do, I'll step away from the technology, but we need basically slower speeds to support people walking, wheeling or riding. Adequate infrastructure for people for alternative modes in separated infrastructure from on busier roads, and also good policy that actually helps people make better choices about their mobility, and better choices for themselves, but also better choices for sort of public choices. So I think technology is really important to assist us in doing this, and so in particularly about sustainable travel, and I mean there's some amazing functionalities in terms of apps that can link us up with transport services so that we can kind of get around the city a lot more easy, make it more convenient, and also for planners and for governments as well. There's a lot of technologies that allow them to manage, monitor transport systems in real time, and all these things can be great. But ultimately, I think we need to go back to the fundamentals, is in terms of is technology necessary for this? Is there something which is a solution that we don't need to sort of invest so much in terms of the expense, the expertise, and I think a lot of the problems we do have in cities, really we can fix with solutions that were available a long time ago for us.
A few years ago, there was a survey that found 45% of people have never heard of smart cities, and 54% don't understand the concept. Do you think these stats have changed? And how can individuals get more involved in advocating for smart urban planning?
I would say that the statistics have not changed that much. I don't think it's a big deal. I think smart cities is sometimes a bit of a confusing term and a bit of a distraction. I think it's better to think more about, I suppose, the digital technology and how it is more generally about how it's being implemented in these different places. So I don't think that's a big issue if people don't understand smart cities. But I do think I think really the best way for people to get involved is to ask questions about technology, and I mean smart cities is a great term in that it draws attention to some of these technologies and these types of technologies, but sometimes they're being rolled out outside of the smart cities sort of label. There are some good groups that advocate for more rights around sort of digital rights that's worth getting involved in. So Digital Rights Watch and the Centre for Responsible Technology is the other one. So these are groups that really advocate for the ethical use of technologies, and it will be more broadly, but they do touch upon smart cities. And I think Digital Rights Watch had a campaign recently about banning facial recognition technology in private spaces. So I think for people to be involved is to ask those questions. There's a series of questions. I think they're good in most settings when thinking about urban development, in looking at who's benefiting from this, who's losing out, and what trade-offs are being made across the sort of the public and private interests here.
Courtney, you're a prolific author. We see a few papers being pumped out on a fairly regular basis by your good self. What's next for you in this research space? Because we're living in very interesting times, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. So I have a report coming out shortly, which is, again, it's on urban mobility, but it's been looking at last mile delivery. So since COVID, the rate of home delivery has increased, and
it's exploded.
It's exploded, yeah, and it's forecast to increase even more over the next decade, and probably beyond that. So it's created an issue in terms of trying to get parcels or smaller parcels to people in busy centres. And what we've been looking at is the role for what we've called micromobility in this, in terms of small electronic devices or modes of transport to deliver that last mile package. So basically to the door from the delivery centre. So we looked at cargo bikes, we looked at drones and robots. So delivery robots, which look like a little esky, that will drive along.
I've seen those in America.
I've seen them in Sydney.
They're very cute.
Yeah, they've got little lights on them.
Yeah.
And then sometimes cars run them over.
That's right.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, no, my banh mi's
It's
been
really
smashed.
sad. I've seen those videos.
Yeah. It does happen, and that, I think, this is, one of the particularly with the robots is one of the key findings in this is we need to understand the trade-offs in terms of the space that these modes do take up on footpaths, and that might be particularly in busy areas when you have a lot of people, and we have these sort of competing demands for this space. So, and the other one was drones as well, which we have a couple of trials in Australia. We may get one here in Perth in the future. And these are drones that deliver mainly sort of convenience items, coffees, fast food.
I wouldn't mind getting my coffee in the morning from a drone.
Well,
that would be kind of cool.
There's less and less reasons now to actually step outside your front door, which in itself I think is frightening. But anyway, that's just me. Courtney, it's great that we've got people like you staying across it and keeping us informed as to the latest developments. And we really appreciate you coming in today and talking to us about the development of smart cities. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Lovely to be here. Thanks.
You've been listening to The Future Of, a podcast recorded on Wajak Bujar and powered by Curtin University. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it. And if you want to hear from more experts, stay up to date by following us on your favourite podcast app. Bye for now.